BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday. Another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? So, I had a completely different topic scheduled to discuss with you guys here on BBOR for the Friday segment. However, I have to give a shout out to Bruce, who sent this into the Facebook page, and it is a new article that came out about the Jack the Ripper mystery. Last week on the channel I was talking about the Openshaw letter, which was mailed after some of the more widely accepted Jack the Ripper letters back in 1888. And there are just so many theories out there in regards to who committed the Whitechapel murders. The Ripper launched a crime spree that began on August 31st of 1888 and concluded on November 9th of that year. So as you see, it's really only about 2.5 months of activity where the Ripper was operating, and that has allowed people to connect the dots in all kinds of different ways. And I also need to give the condition that these types of news articles pop up from time to time. I've talked before about how I used to be a writer for an entertainment website, and one of the final pieces that I wrote was about how there was going to be some new DNA breakthrough in the Jack the Ripper mystery, and they were going to identify a suspect named Aaron Kosminski, but that, of course, did not happen, and the Ripper case is still wide open. Not only is it unsolved, it is indeed wide open because people aren't really zeroing in on too many suspects. But I wanted to discuss this particular piece of news for the following reasons. Firstly, it's something different which I've never covered on the channel before, and secondly, it goes on to tie into some types of theories, and there's a lot of hypothesizing as well as just sharing some other ideas, and some of them have come up on the channel before, others have not. And let's have a look here at this article written by Arian Jane Prosser, and this is from the Daily Mail. Is this the face of Jack the Ripper, a carving of Russian lunatic who was Victorian Chief Inspector's top suspect is found engraved on a wooden cane that was a retirement gift to the policeman. A chilling discovery has been made which could finally reveal the identity of the notorious serial killer Jack the Ripper. The serial killer terrorized the streets of Whitechapel in 1888, and the truth surrounding his identity has long intrigued people in Britain and around the globe. Now researchers have discovered a walking stick carved with the face of a man believed to have mutilated and killed 5 women in the capital's East End. The cane has the face of a drawn, haggard older man, whose eyes darting menacingly underneath a long brown hood, thought to be the only facial composite of Jack the Ripper that exists today. My immediate response to that is that this is a very confusing way of putting it. Firstly, it's not 100% certain that this new suspect is Jack the Ripper, but the article's making it seem that way. I guess they're trying to pull people in. And they said that he has the face of a drawn, haggard older man. I misread that the first time. Like drawn, like drawing was what my brain processed. But very clearly it is a carving, and I hope that isn't misrepresented online or misstated elsewhere that the face was drawn on. It is obviously carved on. I just wanted to be very clear. It is believed that the walking stick, previously thought to have been lost, was handed over to Chief Inspector Frederick Aberline after his term of a team of 7 officers when he was taken off the case in 1889. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly were all murdered by the Ripper between August 31st and November 9th of 1888. It is believed that other murders in the area taking place before and after 1888 could also be attributed to Jack the Ripper. I have briefly read up on some of these, such as the murder of Martha Tabram, and I'm not seeing a lot of similarities because she was stabbed numerous times, but the Ripper victims, with the exception of Liz Stride, were mutilated and severely mutilated. I mean, we're talking about things like getting a kidney cut out and such, and I just didn't see those exact details. And furthermore, there just doesn't appear to be hard evidence, and what I think is more telling of the story is the fact that this is just so similar to the Zodiac Killer mystery. People are just trying to connect this unidentified serial killer to a set of new homicides, and they're trying to connect the dots in inappropriate ways. Okay, somebody murdered 5 people. That doesn't mean that they murdered 6 just because someone else died in the vicinity of this crime spree, especially when it comes to a crime that was committed in a completely different manner or fashion, so says me anyway. The women who worked as prostitutes were had their throats slashed, and 3 of them having their organs removed. But an important detail, I think, is also to note that 4 out of the 5 victims were strangled first. And I have to give credit to one of you guys in the audience. Shaper Art was the one who pointed out that strangling the victim first would cause less arterial spray after she would have been murdered and cut open because her heart would stop beating, and Liz Stride was the one who was not mutilated. Her throat was slashed and more blood was actually found at that crime scene, even though she wasn't mutilated. So please feel free to put your ideas in the comment section down below, and you can always like and subscribe if you want to follow along with these true crime discussions. From one of the victims, half a kidney was removed and sent to police officers, along with a series of notes signed off from Jack the Ripper. But the letter that contained the kidney, the From Hell letter, did not say Jack the Ripper. The Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard, which came first, which are mostly recognized as either authentic communications or they were written by the same person. Those two talk about, well, not only being the Ripper, but also giving himself the name Jack. The From Hell letter did not, and that is maybe the most famous letter. Police researchers believe etched onto the stick was a image inspired by the suspect, who was a Russian lunatic called Dr. Alexander Pedachenko. And at last we have finally got the name of the suspect who was on the stick, a maniac who had been living in London during the killing spree, the Telegraph reports. And some evidence that would point to a Russian Jack the Ripper suspect would be that in that From Hell letter that I just mentioned, the language is very odd, there are misspellings. There are misspellings all throughout the Ripper communications, and the Ripper is very deranged in the communications. For example, talking about how he tried to take the victim's blood in a jar, but it turned thick like glue, so red ink will have to do, and very, very horrific and gruesome things. But there is some linguistic evidence to suggest that Jack the Ripper wasn't a native English speaker. His name was written on a sign next to the cane while it was on display at the Bramshill Police Staff College. When the college closed down in 2015, the cane was feared to have been lost, but buried in the archives at Written on Dunsmore, Warwickshire. Staff at the College of Policing found it once again. So as you see, this isn't the newest discovery. It's more or less that the cane was there until 2015 and then rediscovered. The college said the cane is believed to be the only facial composite of the notorious Ripper and will now be on display with the original news cuttings about the murders. I mean, it's really unfair to call it a composite. It sounds like, well, composite of the Ripper. It sounds like an image of a suspect, and there's a difference between just somebody's suspect or someone's pet theory and actually solving the case. Anthony Cash of the College of Policing said, "Finding this cane was an exciting moment. Jack the Ripper is one of the biggest and most infamous murder cases in history, and his crimes were significant in paving the way for modern policing and forensics, and it caused police to begin experimenting and developing new techniques as they attempted to try and solve these murders." And I think when a lot of us look back to 1888, we often think about how the crimes were committed, or it just seems like a puzzle that we're trying to solve. But even though it's more than 100 years ago, real people were murdered, and rest in peace to the victims. The walking cane is such a fascinating artifact which represents a historically significant time in policing, and it's amazing that we can put it on display here in Brighton, one of the officers said. The claim that the cane contains the face of the cold-blooded killer, however, is controversial among historians interested in the Ripper case. Some suggest that the stick may have been created by cash-hungry salesmen and sold to the crowds who took to the scenes of the killings, with others saying that each officer who worked on the murder investigation was handed the same walking stick, meaning that it was not a bespoke item from Mr. Aberline. And I don't doubt that things like that may have happened at some point where some other canes were distributed. Now, this is also just a little bit of guesswork on the part of other researchers. I mean, unless they have some way of certainly identifying that the cane is not actually featuring the investigator's pet suspect. Mr. Aberline had climbed up the ranks of Scotland Yard, becoming the chief detective in the Criminal Investigation Department, but mistakes were made during the initial inquiries into the murders, with no fingerprinting being able to distinguish the difference between even human and animal blood, let alone the differences between people. I think that is such a weird part of the article, and sometimes you read these things just to find the weird stuff. Mistakes were made during the investigations into the murders, with no fingerprinting being able to distinguish the difference between even human and animal blood. I think there are a couple typos going on, but what is important to remember is DNA testing did not exist at the time. And as I understand what the Jack the Ripper communication, the Dear Boss letter, Jack the Ripper's first letter, it was written in 1888, and it was stolen from the police archives and then returned in 1988. But because it had been gone for so long that DNA testing was not possible, it had been overly contaminated. So now we can't exactly use the Dear Boss letter for anything forensically other than handwriting analysis and forensic linguistics. This means that the identity of Jack the Ripper may never be solved. There are many theories out there as to who the infamous serial killer was, from Queen Victoria's surgeon Sir John Williams, who had a surgery practice in Whitechapel at the time, to her grandson, Prince Albert Victor, who was taken to an asylum. And those just immediately strike me as a little bit of outrageous. I'm not saying they're wrong, because I'm not overly familiar with them. Just, well, let's look at the royal connection. There are a couple different variants of it, but one of them is that the murders were committed purely because somebody in the royal family developed a relationship with the prostitute Mary Kelly, the final Ripper victim, and a series of additional murders were committed to confuse the authorities or to be a distraction because Mary Kelly was pregnant by this member of the royal family. It would have been an outrage. There's also a story that they secretly got married, theorizing, and it's very, very intriguing, but is that what actually happened? I have immediate doubts of, like, in a skeptical way, and I'll just leave it at that. Jack the Ripper is thought to have killed at least 5 young women in Whitechapel in East London between September and November of 1888. It's also important to remember that not all the victims were extremely young, like the Zodiac Killer victims. I believe Liz Stride was in her mid-40s at the time, so I think that this writer is following the news, but only sharing a basic, minimal set of facts about the Ripper case. Numerous individuals have been accused of being the serial killer. At the time, police suspected that the Ripper must have been a butcher due to the way his victims were killed, and the fact that they were discovered near the dockyards where meat was brought to the city. Possibly, but that's, again, there's so many other possibilities about how and why the victims could have been murdered. It doesn't have to have been a butcher. There are several alleged links between the killer and the royals. First is Sir William Gould, the royal physician. Many have accused him of getting rid of the alleged prostitutes' bodies, while claiming that he was the Ripper himself. A book is named Queen Victoria's surgeon Sir John Williams as the infamous killer. He had a surgery practice in Whitechapel at the time. Another theory links the murders with Queen Victoria's grandson, Prince Albert Victor, the Duke of Clarence. At one point, cotton merchant James Maybrick was the number one suspect, following the publication of some of his diary, which appeared to suggest that he was the killer. Some believe the diary to be a forgery, although no one has been able to suggest who forged it. Other suspects include Montague John Druitt, a Dorset-born barrister. He killed himself in the Thames River 7 weeks after the last murder. And from talking about the Zodiac case every Monday, I'm also reminded of these theories that, the reason why the crime stopped is because the killer died shortly after the crime spree. George Chapman, otherwise known as Severin Glazovsky, is also the suspect after he poisoned 3 of his wives and was hanged in 1903. Another suspected by the police was Aaron Kosminski. He was admitted to Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum and died there. And he was that suspect that I mentioned at the beginning. And some people swear to this day that Aaron Kosminski was indeed Jack the Ripper. Dr. Thomas Neil Cream poisoned 4 London prostitutes with strychnine and was hanged in 1892. Okay, very important note here. He poisoned 4 prostitutes? Very different psychopathology. I mean, did he mutilate their bodies? I mean, did he attack them in dark alleys the way that the Ripper went after some of the victims? It sounds like a very different type of criminal. Some of the more bizarre links include Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland, who taught at Christ Church until 1881, and was at the forefront of the Ripper murder scenery. Well, I mean, you're going to have to do a lot more than just say that he lived in London. I mean, how many men lived in London at the time? Winston Churchill's father, Lord Randolph Churchill, has also been named as a potential suspect. I will believe it when we have the proof. Crime writer Patricia Cornwell believes she has cracked the case by unearthing evidence that confirms that Walter Sickert, an influential artist, as the prime suspect. Her theories have generally not been accepted. And I think that's kind of true. I mean, I'm not super familiar with the Walter Sickert connection. I believe it involves masonry, like the Freemasons, and some secret belief system, but I don't want to comment too much on it. But just from reading other people's comments about her, I agree that they aren't widely accepted, but I would love to learn more about it. I would love to truly examine that theory. Author William J. Perring raised the possibility that Jack the Ripper might actually be Julia, a Salvation Army soldier. In The Seduction of Mary Kelly, his novel about the life and times of the final victim, he suggests Jack the Ripper was in fact a woman, and he calls her Julia, but this is something like the Jill the Ripper theory, where that if somebody committed these murders, they would have had blood all over their clothes, in public. Who could have gotten away with that? Perhaps a midwife, a woman, like someone who would also not be very suspected by the police. So that's how the Jill the Ripper theory forms. And I'm reminded of a different Russian serial killer, not even the Russian suspect here, but also the serial killer Alexander Pichushkin was the chessboard killer. And I was watching a documentary once and they said his crimes were so vicious that the authorities believed that it may have been a woman because they thought that women killed more viciously than men. And I don't accept that at all from talking about lots of serial killer cases and true crime cases here on BBOR. But that is something that I wanted to share with you guys. Crime historian Dr. Jan Bondesen has named Henrik de Jong as a prime suspect for the most notorious set of unsolved murders in history. Again, awkward sentences, and you can tell that that is inserted into the article. At the time of the Whitechapel murders, de Jong is believed to have worked as a steward on board a ship, which made frequent trips from Rotterdam to London, providing him with the perfect means of getting out of the country after his heinous crimes. I follow everything you're saying, I'll give you that one. He later murdered 2 of his ex-wives in the Netherlands in 1893 and bludgeoned to death 2 women above a pub before attempting to set their bodies on fire in Belgium in 1898. Alright, well, setting their bodies on fire, that didn't happen to the Ripper victims, so that's a strike against him. But I just want to point out he's also a Dutch individual from Rotterdam, so that's another non-native English speaker, to the best of my knowledge. And then the article just kind of ends without much of a conclusion. I think that I wanted to present this finding that they've rediscovered the cane, and that there are many other theories out there. Not once did it mention Charles Cross, though, who is perhaps one of the more widely discussed suspects on the internet, and I was also quite surprised about that. And as you can see from this episode, this was something that was shared to me by one of you guys in the audience. So if you have anything that you would like discussed on the channel, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below, and maybe it will make its way onto an Anything Goes Friday segment. But the topic list is getting rather big, and somebody once sent me a playlist of videos on Charles Cross as a Jack the Ripper suspect, and I would like to explore that in greater detail. However, I think that the Ripper case is one that's going to be much more difficult to solve than the Zodiac Killer mystery, or the Phantom Killer mystery, or even the death of JonBenet Ramsey from 1996. I talk about all of these cases regularly on the channel, and as I said, you can like and subscribe. With the Ripper, so much time has gone by, the evidence has depreciated, and, well, it's also been destroyed in some ways, and as this article stated, in its own awkwardness, a lot of evidence was probably never collected to begin with. But did any of these theories stand out to you? Did any of them make you think, oh, no, wait a second, that's it, that's what happened? So please feel free to put your ideas on the comment section down below, and feel free to just discuss this with anyone in the comment section as well. Be respectful, though. And that's all for me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there was always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.